First of all, I wanted to check with you how your first week has been for you. So, how you've been. Perhaps you've noticed that, I wanted to share two things with you about that. First of all, let me make myself visible. Hi. First of all, well done. I've liked, and Sharona's liked, and the tutors have liked teaching to you this first week. So my compliments to you, which is weird to give a group of students compliments, but I think it applies in this case. You've done well as a group. I think the lectures were enjoyable and the tutorials were enjoyable, mainly because you were well prepared and you were actually very much engaged with the readings and the course materials. So that is awesome. And speaking from my specific experience during these lectures, it's nice to see that, well, if I glance at the Zoom group chat, it's good to see that you're actually engaged with the material and actually thinking about the questions I'm asking you and the problems I'm presenting to you. With some humor thrown in as well, but in most cases it's on topic as well, so that's good to see. All right, that's good. Indeed, comment for engagement. So thanks, and thanks for being such an active participant in this, weird way of teaching that we've cooked up for you for this semester. Second of all, your experience this week might have been somewhat disjointed. So for some of you, it was more unclear than we would like it to be what your tutorial number was, how to enroll in a weekly assignment, when the weekly assignment was due, and so forth and so forth. So that has to do with us figuring out all technicalities, both related to the fact that we've changed to a new setup for the whole bachelor. So we've got a new program with a different breakdown over tutorial groups, which was a struggle for the education desk to figure out. And working with new technology because of online teaching can give some issues as well sometimes. So to be sure, that has caused some issues, and to make sure that your grade won't suffer under our technological or organizational issues, we've decided that if you miss the deadline or the first one of the first assignments, we won't count that towards your grade, which is a one-time thing only. So we still appreciate if you hand in everything on time starting now, and kudos for everyone who has already done so, even under the circumstances. So again, compliments. Most people of you have, even under these circumstances, worked well and done all the stuff you need to do. But we also don't want the few individuals who, weren't enrolled in a tutorial group, for example, to suffer the downsides of that. So that's why we made those changes. If you're new to thinking about what are the consequences of missing assignments or not being present during the tutorials, please check the examinations regulations, which should be online now on Canvas as well, so you can see the breakdown of what happens if you miss anything. Basically, the summary would be starting from now on, so ignoring last week, you can miss a couple of things. That way we try to account for or create the possibility that, of course, for whatever reason, you could be ill, fall ill. So you could miss 1 week of education. So that's why you're only starting to see the downside of missing stuff on your grade after missing a couple of things. So check that out if you're curious, but for now we'll just assume that you'll complete everything and be present where you need to be. And we'll make sure that all those technical and organizational issues are behind us. All right, but again, I want to stress thanks for your engagement so far. You're a nice group to work with, so let's continue doing that. Today we're going to talk about deductive arguments, but first I want to get your critical thinking started by giving you an example. This is an example from the Dutch supermarket chain, Albert Heijn. You're probably familiar with that. So let's say you're not a vegetarian, you're a flexitarian. and you'd like to eat meat sometimes. So you decide to eat some chicken, this particularly young edition of a chicken, and you want to make sure when you buy it, or the process of the chicken going from this instance to that instance of being a chicken has gone through a fair and honest process, a pure and honest process. So that's why Albert Heijn, a couple of years ago, designed the label pure and honest, puur en eerlijk, it says here in Dutch, which means pure and honest. And Albert Heijn did so, according to their own webpage, to help you as a consumer. So, of course, as a consumer, you don't want to have chickens or be a factor in the life of chickens in such a way that their life deteriorates. So you want to make sure that you buy your chicken fillets from a reputable source. And to make that process easier, Albert Heijn invented the label pure and honest. As a consumer, you might be tempted to think, so that does mean that if I buy something and it bears the label pure and honest in Albert Heijn, that means it's been produced in a pure and honest way. So if you define pure and honest to be something that's good for both the welfare of the planet as well as all the animals and human beings living in it, might be an intuitive summary, then you would assume that if I buy something bearing this label, it's been produced in a way that's good for both humans and animals and the planet as a whole. But if we look under the hood, as it were, and we look critically at what Albert Heijn precisely means with the term pure and honest, well, a different image arises. If you would have checked their website back in the day when there was some outcry over this labeling practice, Albert Heijn, strictly speaking, wasn't at fault. So a lot of people said pure and honest is a misleading label because it implies the wrong things. Albert Heijn, to their credit, actually specified an exact definition for what they meant with the term pure and honest. So here we go. They said if something is pure and honest, it means that it's either pure or it's honest, which is a weird way of labeling an or operator, calling it and, but for sure, bear with Albert Heijn. So pure and honest means it's either pure or honest. That means that pure means that there has been taken extra care for nature or the environment, and honest means there has been taken, they've been made sure to take extra care for people or animals. So you mean that, so if you buy a product which is labeled pure and honest, that means that it was either pure or honest, and it being pure either means it's produced in a biologically friendly way or an ecologically friendly way, and it being honest means it's either fair trade or free range, made from free range animals. So basically, what you expect as a consumer is when you buy something that's pure and honest, is all those things. It's biologically friendly, ecologically friendly, fair trade, and free range, right? But it's not. And Albert Heijn specified that it's not by carefully using the or operators and labeling it as an and operator. Which is how you might be misled by a supermarket chain, even though they are, strictly speaking, not in the wrong, because their primary definition, right, the primary extension of the term pure and honest is clearly described here. So what we see with this example, I like this example, it shows you how you should be on the lookout as an actual consumer. So, and it also shows you how you can use logic to better understand what a specific definition entails, in this case, according to the supermarket. We'll be talking more about logic and logical operators today, which is part of the 5 steps that we're taking this month. If you remember, I'm going to a lot of examples to make sure you try and develop that critical disposition. This Albert Heijn example was another one of it. And you need to learn to recognize arguments. You need to learn to reconstruct arguments, which we started out doing last week, and we'll pick that up again next week. Then the next step is logical assessment, and then factual assessment. For this week, we're going to focus on that 4th step. So we're going to look at logical assessment, both for evaluating deductive validity as well as inductive force, which are both related to that step of logical assessment. All right, how we're going to do that today is we're going to first look at what deductive arguments are and what deductive validity actually is or entails when looking at arguments. Then we're going to specifically zoom into, we're going to do a deep dive, as it were, to better understand what the conditional actually is when it's used in deductive arguments. And finally, we're going to zoom out a bit, and we're going to try to hand you some more practical tools for that step of logical assessment when you're trying to assess whether an argument is deductively valid. All right. So let's get started. Yeah, this was a warning I tried to add. It applies to this week in general. I think this week, the contents of this week, both for my lectures as well as Sharon's lecture and the tutorial, is about as abstract as it's going to get in this course. Which, if you're like me, you like that abstractness and that challenge. If you're practical, you should consider that we try to cover these concepts in this amount of depth because it offers the basis for the rest of what we're going to talk about, right? So if you have that sound basis, you can rely on that for the rest of the course. And also be reminded that if it's a struggle for you this week to get all the concepts, please be reminded that they will return in the next couple of weeks, and please be reminded that it doesn't get much more abstract than the stuff we're going to talk about this week. So bear with me. All right. What I want you to walk away with today, or close your computer or your laptop with, switch off your webcam or Zoom session. When you do that in 2 hours or so, I want you to properly understand the answer to this question. And the question is, why do we strive for falsification in science? Right? So last week, Sharon posted a video on Canvas, which included a discussion of the empirical cycle, in which we go from having an observation to formulating a theory to deriving a prediction, testing that prediction, and evaluating the theory accordingly, and using that as a new observation for the beginning of another round on that empirical cycle. Part of that empirical cycle is the deduction step and the testing of the stuff we deduce from a theory. And Karl Popper, as you're familiar with on the basis of the first year, said that we should strive for falsification. Why? Why should we try and falsify our predictions? So all your intuitions check out. We should indeed strive for falsification, and I guess most of you have a good sense of why that should be. What I would hope you would walk away with after this lecture is why you understand the logic behind the falsification, that you understand the logic behind the falsification principle, which is indeed one of the reasons why it was formulated in this way. So I'll get back to this example at the end of the lecture, and I hope that you can explain to me what the logic behind falsification is. Let's put that to a more practical example. All right. So according to these researchers, there's a difference between a commercial if you include the short fragment of 2 seconds or so of the frog jumping from behind the drain pipe, and using the fragment without the frog. And they claim that the emotional impact of the advertisement is larger if the frog jumps from behind the pipe than if that's not the case. The way that they reason about this is as follows. And at the end of the lecture, you should hopefully understand the logic or lack thereof in their reasoning about these results. So they measure the emotional response not directly, not by asking, or indirectly by asking people, what did you feel when watching the video? No, they measure it using a general measure of brain activation or brain activity, which is measured using an EEG, and they look at the difference in general activation in the left compared to the right hemisphere, which is usually associated with approach tendencies, which are usually associated with having a positive emotional response. right? If you're feeling positive about something, you're more likely to want to approach that, right? I want it because I feel positive about it. That's the reasoning. So some form of brain activity, general form of brain activity, which is related to approach tendencies, which is in turn related to emotional responses, is higher in the condition where the frog is present compared to using the video where the frog isn't present. And they say, so the effectiveness of the commercial, or crucial for the effectiveness of the commercial, is the presence of the frog. You should start to see by the end of the lecture what the logic and reasoning behind this, about these results actually is, and how that relates to falsification, and why we should be skeptical in this case. That we can indeed conclude that there's an positive emotional response that is stronger in the frog case compared to the non-frog case.